There's a voice in your head. You hear it every day. It comments. It judges. It plans. It warns. It whispers at night when the world is quiet. But here's the question no one asks. Who is it? Really? Is it you? Because if it were, why does it argue with you? Why does it criticize you? Why does it scare you? Let's talk about what this voice is. Most people think of it as their consciousness, their inner monologue, the self talking to itself. But psychologists call it something else. The default mode network. It's the part of your brain that activates when you're not focused on anything. When you're daydreaming, ruminating, wandering through thoughts. It constructs your sense of identity, your timeline, your ongoing story. And it talks. Endlessly. But here's the twist. That voice wasn't always there. You weren't born with it. Babies don't narrate their lives. They feel, react, exist. The voice developed as you learned language, as you were taught concepts, as you absorbed ideas about right and wrong, about success, about failure, about you. Let's talk about how the voice is built. It's not a single entity. It's an echo chamber of parents, teachers, peers, culture, religion, media, every should you've ever heard, every rule you've ever followed, every insult you've ever received becomes part of the chorus. And over time, you mistake it for your own thoughts. But they're not all yours. Some were installed. Let's talk about the critic. Almost everyone has an inner voice that says, "That was stupid. You're not good enough. They're going to leave you. You always mess this up." You don't choose these thoughts. They appear, uninvited, unrelenting. And somehow, you believe them. Why? Because the voice wears the mask of familiarity. And what's familiar feels true, even when it's toxic. Let's talk about the survival function. That critical voice wasn't meant to destroy you. It evolved to protect you, to predict danger, to anticipate rejection, to scan for patterns. If you were shamed as a child, the voice learned to shame you first, so no one else could. If love was conditional, the voice learned to keep you small, so you wouldn't be abandoned. The voice became a guard dog, but one that bites its owner. Let's talk about the illusion of control. You think you're in charge. You think you are thinking these thoughts. But have you ever tried to stop the voice? You sit. You breathe. You try to be still. And it keeps going. And going. And going. Narrating. Comparing. Planning. Replaying. Worrying. If you can't turn it off, is it really you? Or is it a program running in the background? One you inherited, not one you authored? Let's pause. That voice in your head, it's not a villain, but it's not always your friend either. It's a tape recorder, a narrator, a safety mechanism, a mask. And the deeper question is not, why is it talking? But, who's listening? You think you know who you are. You have a name, a job, a history, a personality. But what if most of that is just a voice you started believing? Let's talk about the self as a story. The voice in your head doesn't just comment. It constructs. It builds a narrative around you. A version of you with traits, habits, flaws, dreams. I'm bad with people. I'm always anxious. I have a short temper. I don't deserve love. It repeats these thoughts so often, they harden into identity. But they're not truths. They're scripts. And most of them were written for you, long before you were conscious enough to question them. Let's talk about how identity is programmed. As a child, you didn't decide who you were. You were told, "You're the smart one. You're the difficult one. You're too sensitive. You're the problem." And your mind, desperate to survive and belong, Absorb those labels, not as descriptions, but as definitions. And now, every time the voice speaks, it reinforces that early programming. You think it's self-awareness. It's actually conditioning. Let's talk about how the voice becomes a filter. You enter a room. You meet someone new. You speak. You make a joke. And the voice instantly evaluates. That sounded dumb. They didn't laugh enough. They think you're annoying. It does this before you can consciously think. Because your inner voice isn't just commentary. It's a lens. It determines what you notice, how you interpret, what you remember. And over time, it creates a world that reflects its fears. If the voice says you're unlovable, you'll miss every act of affection and cling to every sign of rejection. If it says you're broken, you'll sabotage connection and feel justified when people pull away. Let's talk about emotional sabotage. That voice in your head doesn't want you to heal, because healing means change, and change threatens the voice's authority. So when you get close to peace, it pulls you back. Don't trust this. It won't last. You don't deserve this. You're faking it. Not because it's cruel, because it's familiar. The voice would rather keep you stuck in a painful identity than risk losing its role as narrator. Let's talk about false safety. We cling to the voice, even when it hurts us, because it gives us the illusion of control. It tells us what to expect, who to be wary of, why things happened, what's going to go wrong. And in chaos, that structure feels comforting, but it's not real safety. It's a cage. Let's talk about inner conflict. Sometimes the voice argues with itself. You should speak up. No, stay quiet. You deserve love. You're too much. Change your life. You'll fail anyway. And you feel paralyzed because it's not one voice. It's a system of parts, competing, fighting, screaming over each other. And in the middle of that chaos, you lose touch with your actual self. Let's talk about intuition versus voice. Intuition is quiet, grounded, simple. It doesn't yell, doesn't repeat. It speaks once, and you feel it in your body. The voice? It's loud, compulsive, urgent. It speaks from fear, from past pain, from old wounds. But because it's louder, you think it must be true. Let's talk about what happens when you believe the voice. You live defensively, cautiously. You don't try new things. You don't speak your truth. You don't trust people. You shrink. Not because you want to, but because the voice tells you it's safer this way. And one day, you wake up in a life that doesn't reflect who you are, but who the voice convinced you to be. Let's pause. You are not the voice. You are the one hearing it. And once you realize that, you can question it, redirect it, unmask it. You can start to ask, what if I don't believe this anymore? And that changes everything. There comes a moment, sometimes after years, when the voice in your head says something, and for the first time, you don't believe it. It tells you you're failing, but something deep inside doesn't flinch. It warns you they don't like you, but you stay present. It screams that you're not enough, but you just breathe. That moment is quiet, small, but it means everything. Because in that moment, you discover something terrifying and beautiful. There's someone behind the voice, listening. Let's talk about the part of you that hears the voice without becoming it. The part that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, doesn't explain. It just watches. That awareness, that silent noticing, it doesn't react. It just is. And it's always been there, even when you forgot. Let's talk about how to reach it. Not by force, not by logic, but by stepping away from the noise. You sit. You breathe. You notice. A thought appears about your worth, your fear, your future. But instead of grabbing it, you let it pass, like watching clouds in a sky that isn't yours to control. And beneath it is stillness. That stillness isn't empty. It's not numb. It's not dissociation. It's you. The you that isn't performing, isn't proving, isn't reacting to ghosts. Let's talk about what happens when you identify with the listener instead of the voice. The inner critic loses power. It becomes just one sound in a room full of possibilities. It no longer dictates your actions. It no longer defines your identity. And that's when the fear shifts. Not because the voice is gone, but because you no longer believe it's God. Let's talk about the fear of losing the voice. Yes, there's fear, because the voice gave you rules. It told you who to be. It tried to keep you safe. Even if it did so by making you small, when you stop obeying it, you feel exposed, untethered, like you're floating without instructions. But stay in that space, because something else awakens there. Not another identity, not another narrative, but presence, real presence. Let's talk about what presence actually feels like. It's not peace that lasts forever. It's not the absence of pain. It's the ability to sit with what is without drowning in it. It's saying, this is fear. This is shame. This is joy. This is me, noticing all of it. And it's enough. Let's talk about life after the voice becomes optional. You'll still hear it. You'll still have anxious thoughts. Still judge. Still react. But less often. Less urgently. Less automatically. You'll pause before acting. You'll question before obeying. You'll feel before reacting. And slowly, your life will shift. From a scripted loop to something alive. Curious. Open. Let's talk about what you become when you stop being the voice. You become the witness. The space in which all experience arises and falls. You become the part of you that cannot be named and never needed to be fixed. Because it was never broken. Let's close with this. The voice in your head isn't evil. It's scared. It's tired. It's trying to help the only way it knows how. But you've outgrown it. And when you finally see that, when you meet the silence beneath the noise, you won't be afraid of who you are. You'll finally know you're not the voice. You're the one who hears it and chooses what to believe. And in that choosing, you become free.